thanks for being here. I know we have a good group, or we're anticipating a good group to attend through our Swather Sports Network link, and I think we've got everything worked out there, and we'll have an opportunity. If you're attending through that, you can at any point ask questions or make comments in the comments section, and Mr. Stoppel will be monitoring that. So I want to make sure everybody is aware that you can communicate with us through that feature, and then if you're in the crowd, you can raise your hand or just holler if you have questions or comments at any point. So really appreciate you being here, and my name is Ben Proctor. For those that don't know, this is going to be a team effort tonight, and hopefully you won't have to listen to me exclusively too long, but we have our middle school principal, Greg Heinrichs, with us, elementary principal, Elisa Crable, and our high school principal, Ty Rhodes, and Mr. Stoppel, our activities director, will also be here to answer questions and address concerns as they come up, especially from a building perspective. If there are things that you want to know based on experiences at a specific building, they can address those better than I can. So this evening, we want to, it's gonna be different information for the most part than what we've covered in the past at some of our community meetings this summer. So you're going to hear some different things, maybe addressing the same topics, but it's a progression. We just continue to make progress towards things, and we're going to talk about our process for doing so and where we're at right now. And I can tell you, and we'll share some details, that information and guidance that we receive changes constantly. And we had, just this afternoon, since probably 3 o'clock, I've gotten some really big updates from both the state and the county on things that impact us, and that's how we have to continue to make adjustments as we go. But we'll be able to share some things with you this evening that I think will be really important for you to know. Just so you know, this will be recorded and available on the Swather Sports Network. We might have to think about the sports, Mrs. Gaston. I don't know if I'd refer to us in the sports mode right now. And we'll be doing a lot of streaming and things like that this year, but those videos will be available for a period of time. So if you miss anything and want to go back and review, you can always do that. So really appreciate you being here, and I think we'll jump right in. I'm going to share just a little bit of information with you. And again, at any time, ask questions. We'll pause at certain times if you have questions through the YouTube comment section. And we'll spend a lot of time at the end going through any and all questions that you have. So, sound okay? All right. So the first thing we want to start with is something that I think is important for us and important for everybody to be aware of. And as I was putting together kind of the format for tonight, we've been talking about this idea of fundamentals and what that means. And I go back to my coaching days, and we always started practices with a good amount of time on fundamentals, so I thought we should start there this evening and talk about what do fundamentals mean and why are they important for us as we think about school. And you can see up on the slideshow, and if you're attending through the link, you can access that slideshow as well. But the fundamentals that we have up here, we're referring to these as fundamentals of safety. And you can see it's broken into two categories. You've got individual and organizational. And there are a lot of other things that we do and will do, but these things we feel like are most critical to our success as we have on-site school. And we'll talk about what that is and some other learning environments we have available too. But as we learn, and very little of what you hear tonight, very little, is going to be my opinion or our administrative team's opinion or what we think about a virus or science or anything else. These things are coming from people who know those things, and we rely on them. And we'll talk about who those people are, who we receive guidance from. But we continue to hear that we need to do these things that we have under those individual fundamentals list. Stay home when sick, practice good hygiene, especially with your hands, social distance, and wear a mask. And we're going to talk about those things and how we're going to enforce those things as we go through our conversation this evening. We also listed some things we will do organizationally that we feel like are very fundamental to our success, especially as we think about a goal of having on-site learning and maintaining that as long as we can throughout the school year. So you can see what some of those things are, how we clean and disinfect and the frequency of that, how we address visitors. You know, it's not that we won't have visitors, but we're going to address them differently. Stable groupings, we've talked about that a lot. If you look at our plan, you're going to see that element addressed, and we'll talk more about what that means as well. Having clear procedures and knowing exactly what to do if we have exposure, and who we communicate with, how we communicate, you know, how we do all those things if we have cases. That's going to be very important, and we feel like we're getting more and more clarity on that as we go. How we consult with public health experts, and how we access data that's important for us to know. And that's, again, where we're not relying on ourselves to pull up tables and graphs from something that we find on social media. We're going to where the experts tell us to go and referring to data that they tell us is most important. And then we want to apply common sense. We want to do things for justifiable reasons and not just do them because, you know, somebody suggested it. We want to know that what we're doing is going to be applied in a good way, in a meaningful way. So we talk about those as fundamentals and things that are kind of the foundation and will allow us to have success as we have school. So questions on that or thoughts on that? I've got one, and that is when we commit to the fundamentals, how do we actually make sure that they happen? Does anybody have that question? We heard that a lot or saw that a lot in our survey. We've done a couple of surveys this summer. And one thing that was consistent from a lot of different perspectives is if you say that you're going to do certain things, how do you actually make those things happen? You know, if we say that we're going to have a mask requirement, how do we enforce that? If we say that we're going to practice some level of social distancing, how do we enforce that? What are the expectations? And what do we do when it doesn't happen? And I think that's if you had that question, I think it's a legitimate question. And then how do you do that and not create an environment where people don't want to be here? You know, and there's a way that I think that we can create a good environment but still establish really clear expectations around those things that are going to allow us to have school. You know, and the reality is with that if we're not able to do those things, if we're not able to establish expectations around fundamental practices that we just looked at, then we're not going to be successful in school. And to me, that's why we do it, you know. And we're going to talk about why we believe it's important that we provide in-person school for our kids. You know, and again, that's not coming from me, that's coming from experts in public health that tell us it's important that we do that. So we believe very strongly, and we're going to talk tomorrow with our staff. So tomorrow is the first day we're going to have with our staff for 5 months, you know, where they're going to be with us and we can sit down and talk about what do these things actually mean for us and how do we establish expectations around fundamental practices and ensure that they happen so that we can continue to have school. That's going to be really important for us. But the part, it's the third bullet. It says create high-quality, positive, interconnected learning environments. And that part's, to me, is probably as critical as our fundamentals. You know, ensuring that with a change in the environment. So I don't know about you, but wearing a mask in a public setting, indoors and all, that changes the environment to a degree. Now, I believe it'll change the environment for our kids. It's going to feel different. And the fact that tables are set up differently or desks are set up differently and we're arranging instruction differently is going to change our environment to a degree. And we have to be extremely intentional because we have a really good track record in Heston. This maybe is my opinion, but I think we could verify it. I really like that mask right there. That's cool. We have done relationships and positive learning environments really well for a really long time. And we're going to have to meet the challenge that's before us now and do those things better than we ever have. And those are the conversations we have to have with our staff, and they know that. But we have to be very intentional about that because the environment will change to a degree, and it will be easy for negativity to creep in, and we can't do that. So having a positive environment is going to be extremely important. That high quality, I think, is another element that we're going to talk a lot about with our staff. You know, we did the best we could with the situation that we had before us in the spring. We changed very quickly and implemented things that we had never expected we would need to implement. And we commend our staff for the excellent work that they did, but we could only do so much as far as providing a quality learning environment when you have to pivot like we had to pivot. And now it's time that no matter what the environment we provide, that it's as high quality as it can be. And that's part of the reason when we looked at our calendar and we said we need more time, we need more time. We need more time to prepare for that. The environment that we have in our classrooms, you probably know that our kids sit in close proximity to one another, facing one another, and they interact constantly. And we're being told that we have to make some adjustments there. Not only is that an adjustment in the physical layout of our classrooms, it's a huge adjustment in how we instruct every day and what we're trained to do. And so that's an adjustment in our practice. And so those adjustments have to reflect our ability to implement things in a really high quality way so that our kids can learn. We have students who will learn from home, and that's going to be a challenge because we're going to have kids on site at home, and we're having to create a positive and interconnected and high quality learning environment for those kids who are in different environments. That's going to be a challenge, but I think we're ready for it, and that's why we need some extra time, and we'll work through that. I skipped the part that says aligning our approach with our core values and safety and health priorities. And the reason that these are up there, I'm going to show you our data from our surveys. We had great responses to our surveys this summer. A lot of participation. Way over half our kids are represented in that survey data. And I will tell you, I've surveyed for many years. I've never seen results that are so diverse on any topic ever. And you could probably imagine that that's true, but it's difficult to wrap your mind around just from one comment to another or one perspective to another how diverse opinions are and perspectives are. And that makes our job a little bit challenging. But as we think about the things that we value here and we think about safety and health, I reached out to KDHE today, the Kansas Department of Health and Environment, and also, several times I called our health department, but they know I'm going to probably call them every day, so they get used to that. But I asked them the question, why should we consider having in-person school in the middle of a pandemic? Why should we? Because one of the first things it says, if you click on the safety or the protect yourself and others link on KDHE website, anybody know what the first thing it says is? Basically, the safest way to stay safe, or the best way to stay safe, is to stay home. So are we defying number one rule from KDHE? So I called them and I asked them about that, and they said no, that's not. You have to look at health and safety in a broader sense. And they guided me to the local health department and said, what do they say? So I called them for the third time today. And they talked about the negative consequences that they have already seen, that we've already experienced from kids being out of school for so long. That it's beyond just a singular health issue, that there's a lot of other things that we have to consider with that. And that's why when it's safe, and as we use guidance from them, we feel very strongly that we need to provide that safe environment, high quality environment, positive environment for our kids. And that's what we're doing. So we want to support families. We know there is no question that there is inherent risk as you think about sending your children in a lot of different areas, but it's heightened at this point. And we want you to be able to make decisions that are in your best interest, and we want to support you 100% in that. And we're going to talk about what those options you have. I'll tell you that we are trying to commit to providing as many options to people as we can. We want to be as flexible as we possibly can. And I don't know that that's everybody's approach, and there may be times where we have to tighten some things up as we go. But we want to provide you with options because we want you to do what's in your best interest and in your children's best interest. We'll talk about what those options are. We will continue to stay very closely connected to state and local public health experts. We're not experts on viruses here. We're going to rely on those who are, or those who know the data, and I've said this over and over, but I have the utmost confidence in our local health officials. I think they've done a tremendous job. They communicate, they have easy to access data, and they have, in my opinion, very, very reasonable perspectives on a lot of different issues related to these things. And I appreciate them very much, and they are 100% accessible. So if we have questions, we can get a hold of them and ask them. And some of that becomes very relevant when issues are more time sensitive. And so that's going to be really important for us moving forward. You know, something that we saw in survey responses was, I don't know if I would call it frustration. It's hard to always interpret folks' intent in writing, but it may have very well been. You know, it seems like information is not as quickly and forthcoming as it needs to be. And I've heard, you know, other districts have this and that, and I've seen a lot of other things. We've tended to take a slow and steady approach to a lot of things, and we probably will continue doing that. And I used the example earlier of some things that came out just today that had we put information out before today on some of these issues, we would have to change it tomorrow. And so we want to be really careful about making sure that we have the best information available to us as we approach the start of school. And so that's been our approach, and we are doing that because we want to make sure we're providing the best service to our community. And we'll talk about some examples of that, but just to give you one, in the survey, a lot of people want to know, what's the hybrid model? You mentioned the hybrid model. What is it? Well, I've told our principals we could design that in 30 minutes and send it out. And we could go to school on Monday and Tuesday, do deep cleaning on Wednesday, and then a new group comes in on Thursday and Friday. That's a very popular model. Do you see any problems with that as a parent or as somebody who feels like kids need to engage more than 2 days a week? I do. And so we want to work through some other options if we can, and sometimes those take a little longer, but we're going to talk about some of those. Not that there's anything wrong with those models, but we want to explore everything before we commit. You know, see what we can do to provide the very best learning opportunities for our kids in Heston. And so that's why we've taken a little slower and steady pace to some of these types of decisions. But we'll get into that here in just a minute. And I asked the question, are we all in this together? Because if you take a topic like this where there's a lot of different opinions, it's easy to get frustrated with other people's opinions, you know. And one of the things I mentioned at our last meeting was one of the common concerns was that not everybody will follow the rules, or other kids, other families. And I think there's going to have to be, if we're going to be successful this school year, I think there's going to have to be some level of commitment that we're going to work really well together. And we're going to partner with each other, you know, to work through challenges that we have in a way that we've never really had to do before. And I believe we can do that and do that really well, but we're going to have to decide that that's what we're going to do. So look forward to that. What did I say? I had 20 minutes, right? That's up. I've got about 10 more slides. Here's some just numbers for you on the parent survey. So first question, how comfortable are you sending your child to, or children to school in person? You can see that 64% said comfortable or more than comfortable, very or totally. 25 said somewhat comfortable, and 11 said not comfortable at all. That's based on about, I think we're at about 230 responses. And I tried to calculate number of kids. It would be well over half of our students reflected in those numbers. I plan to choose the following options for my children. So 83% based on the survey said they would choose in-person learning, 15% remote, 2% were questioning whether they would enroll in Heston schools. We asked and had more options than just these, but what hybrid model? So if we had a combination of in-school versus elsewhere, what works best for you? And those were the three most popular choices. Other choices were less than 10%. Every other day, half days was the most popular. That was in the morning. Afternoon was not as popular. 2 days per week was the other one that had a little bit more sizable number of people. And then we had put out our back to school plan, or just kind of a draft of that, and asked, how do you feel? Do you feel like it's addressing your concerns adequately? 87%, with a large portion of those being agree, said agree or strongly agree, and 13% disagreed. And those were for varying reasons. The ones who disagreed, some felt that it was not addressing some of the safety and mitigation efforts that they would like to see us address. Some felt like it was addressing them too strongly. And that's where you saw kind of a diverse response on that question. Let's talk real quick about our learning environments, and you would see this in the plan. On-site learning is pretty straightforward, and that's where we would be in a phase where kids can come to school every day, and they can follow the fundamentals and the things that we'll have in place to keep them safe, but they attend school and go to classes and eat lunch and do the things that we recognize in school. But the fundamentals that we addressed at the beginning would be firmly in place, and we would expect commitment to that from all. Hybrid learning. So this is kind of it's not something that we were super familiar with before the last couple of months, but I think it's a term that most people now know pretty well. And the purpose of it is to reduce the number of people in a given location, such as a school or a classroom. And if you talk to our county health department, they say, you need to have a go-to hybrid model. We would work with them, and I'll talk about how do we know where we should be at a given point. That's a big question that people have. So we work with them based on their metrics, and we decide that a hybrid is most appropriate. Right now, what we're doing is in the final stages of having our hybrid ready to roll out. And our goal is to do that for sure by next Friday. And the reason it's taking this long is because what we're looking at, I think this is extremely unique from what I hear. We're looking at, for our elementary and middle school kids, of finding alternate attendance centers in our community so that kids can attend school every day, but we can accomplish the goal of reducing numbers in a given location. So a typical hybrid schedule, I mentioned a few examples recently, or just a minute ago, where a lot of schools are doing a few days a week, taking maybe one day where they work in small groups and do what they call deep cleaning, and then other groups come on the off days. What we would like to do for our elementary and middle school kids is continue to provide daily instruction in an alternate location. So what we're doing right now is working with local churches and facilities that have enough open space that we could take a grade level and we could move them to that location with their teachers, and they would experience their school day much like they do now. We would feed them, we would run them through all their classes and engage them, but it would be in a different location because the alternative is their home. And not all of them can be home, not all of them should be home, not all of them have care for them at home. And so we want to work through that, and we hope Mr. Heinrichs and Mrs. Crable have toured facilities and are working with some of our local leaders to see if that's going to work for us. And we're very hopeful that it will. The high school, we've looked at a lot of different models, right, Mr. Rhodes? And one of the things that we like about an AM/PM type schedule, where half the kids would come in the morning, half the kids would come in the afternoon, is that we're able to see our kids every day. We're able to keep them engaged in school every day. And as we finalize those plans, and I wouldn't share them if I didn't think that we were pretty close to doing that, we'll get more information out on exactly what that'll look like for our kids and work through that. But that's part of the reason that it's taken us a little longer to determine what we want to do as far as a hybrid model. But that's where that's what we're looking at right now. So we plan to get that out next week, and in a minute I'll show you the metrics that we'll use to determine whether or not we would be in an on-site or hybrid or remote learning environment. So I'm going to pause and ask for questions or comments at this point if you have any.
We do have a few off of the web chat, so I'll scroll back up. One question was from Heather Hansen. Will you have any social interaction or relationship building focus on students who are distance learning?
That's a perfectly timed question, because we're going to talk about remote learning right now. So let's jump into that a minute. So we've got on-site. I think we're building our list of vocabulary terms that parents are going to be tested on. I always like teaching vocabulary, so we'll have a test at some point during the year, but we're trying to utilize the same language and terms that the Kansas State Department of Education and the Kansas Department of Health and Environment put out for us. And so they refer to in-person learning as on-site, so that's one. A second is hybrid, so know what hybrid is. And then remote, because we call it remote, distance, virtual, online. We can call it a lot of different things. So when we talk about remote learning, and this is another example of something that we received. This was late this afternoon. We got an appendix to the KSDE, KDHE Navigating Change guidance document about remote learning. And there's some really important information in here that we haven't had a chance to really go through in detail. But here's what we know right now about remote learning. Any student can choose to attend remotely. So that's an option that all families have. We want to make sure that's really clear, because I don't know that it's been really clear maybe until this evening. So everybody has the opportunity to start school or to enter into remote learning environment. It's a combination. It's really teacher directed. That's probably misstated. It's a combination of virtual and teacher directed learning, but it's teacher directed learning that includes virtual or online components. And part of that is a new platform that we're going to use this year called Acellus. And if you go or Google Acellus, you can see a lot of information about that. But this platform, it's different than what we had available to us in the spring. We'll still utilize some of the communication platforms that we did in the spring, but Acellus is a curriculum-based virtual learning platform that will be used as a supplement. Our teachers will have a supplemental tool that creates a little bit more accountability around academic content. And we're going to utilize Acellus not only as a remote tool, but that'll be used to some degree in our classrooms as well. We want all kids to be familiar with it, and we're going to have opportunities here before the start of school to receive some training, from both a parent and a student perspective, so that you're very familiar with it. One of the reasons we chose it was because it's easy to implement, easy to learn, and pretty straightforward as far as that goes. A couple other points on remote learning. CASHA, the Kansas State High School Activities Association, said that they are fine with students participating in activities if they are remote learners. We also understand that not only is remote learning an option, but there could be, and again, we'll talk about this in just a second, there could be a point where we might have to move to universal remote learning. And that's why it's important that we understand what remote learning looks like. So if conditions locally became such, we would have to determine with the health department if remote learning and not doing on-site learning is appropriate. And so we have to understand that that could occur, and we would need to know how that looks. Everyone would need to know how that looks. What I can tell you, it's not sitting at a computer all day. We would never promote anything of that nature. What I can also tell you is it can be a little vague as far as what it is. I called KSDE yesterday and talked to one of their directors, executive directors, who is very knowledgeable and helped write a lot of this guidance from KSDE, and asked him, well, we spent a good amount of time on the phone. And he gave me examples of what they see as appropriate. And how he describes it is, we want to try to create as much of a classroom experience that kids would receive in a remote setting as possible. And we know that our kids don't sit at computers for 6 hours a day. They don't sit for 6 hours a day. And so we want to try to replicate a lot of those things. And over the next couple of weeks, our teachers are going to be spending a lot of time on that topic. And we're going to work to provide a lot of guidance on what a quality remote experience can be, knowing we have a good, strong academic tool this year, and that we have opportunities to provide things that we're doing in the classroom to kids at home. But an example, and this is one of the people who design things and have to answer for all of the requirements through not only the state but also the federal government, who said, you have recess at home. You take lunch at home. You do all those things at home just like you do in school. So the idea that it's a rigid 6 hours or 6.5 hours of school, and you have to sit down and just engage in that type of thing at home, that's not what we're looking at. And we'll have more guidance on that. Again, I got a lot of good updates this afternoon because I think that question and concern is coming up a lot. The last part there says we'll provide some guidance on what it'll look like, but the question about social emotional learning, so to get kind of to the question that was asked, in talking to our counselors, and it wasn't directly Dawn, so we didn't speak directly, but I had reached out to one of our counselors, and I think she hollered at others. And, we want to ensure that we are engaging not only from a teacher perspective with all of our remote learners, but our counselors. We talked this morning at the middle school about how can we connect our remote kids at the middle school with their RS class, every day or once a week or whatever, ultimately will work. And again, that's why we need time with staff to decide what are those things going to look like. But when we go back to a positive, high quality and interconnected learning environments is all of those environments, providing that for every kid in the very, very best way we possibly can. Goes back to we want to support you. We don't want to do anything to discourage you from choosing the very best option for you and your family. And so we're going to work hard to provide we believe we can probably do it easier when we see you than we can when you're at home, but that's the challenge we face, is to be able to provide the best, most positive, highest quality, most interconnected learning environment when you're at home too, whether you're choosing to be there or you have to be there. So we're committed to that. I'm not the person to answer how, but I'm telling you that that's what we're going to provide because we got good people to do it. So other questions, Mr. Stoppel back there, or anybody can jump in. Yes, sir. Well, we're looking at very likely doing a grade level or maybe multiple grade levels depending on the facility. So those teachers would be there with the students. Yep, so nobody would be hopping from one building to another. We've got some things to work out there. And I told Mr. Rhodes and Mr. Heinrichs, I'm staying out of it. You guys figure out your schedule because they've got shared staff. So we have teachers that teach both at the high school and middle school. There's some challenges there, but they're smart. They'll figure it out. But as far as, just logistics, that's what we'll have to work through. But yeah, we're planning if we are in a hybrid model, what we'd like to do is have kids stay in one location for sure. So, other questions on that, or Clint?
I have a couple more for you, sir. This one is going to be about band. Where the question was, will students that do distance learning be able to take band?
We talked to our band teacher for a while. Did you know that band is kind of gross? I've learned that. I didn't realize how much slobber and things there are in band, but we had to account for that today. So yes, the answer is yes, and our teachers are not only band, but music education is going to be something that we address specifically. That is not my area. Not musical, but we have excellent music teachers. Not only are they good at what they do, but they have a really good understanding of how safeguards need to be put in place, because I kind of joke that it's kind of gross, but it is a higher risk activity than a lot of other things that we do. And met with Mr. Graverson today. I know our principals have met with our other music teachers, and so we're gonna present specific guidance on music education and provide, yes, an opportunity for kids to continue to engage in that even when they're in a remote environment. Okay. Do you have another one, Glenn? Okay, let's do this one real fast and then we'll hit some questions. Okay, so one of the big questions that people had brought up is how do we determine what learning environment we're in? And you may have seen out in the virtual world that different counties or different school districts have created these matrices or visual representations that have grids and criteria and all that. Here are some of the things that you might see from a county, a school district. We've received some state gating criteria. That officially came out today, but you may have seen it from the Kansas State Board of Education meeting on Tuesday. Some of the metrics that they use are percent of positive tests. So in a county, you would track your numbers of tests and then what percentage of those are positive. That's a common number to use as far as determination. Trends in case numbers, so which direction are they moving? One of the things that our county has talked about is not only, tests related to COVID, but what do rates of flu-like symptoms in the county look like? And I think that's in preparation for flu season. Hospital capacity is a big one. Your school building environment, and that's looking at specifically what is happening in your school. And do you have cases in your school? And can you trace those cases that the transmission is occurring inside the school? I think that's a very big concern for county officials, understanding whether somebody's bringing it in and that's isolated from the outside or if there's actual transmission in a building. Another item that the State Department with KDHE and their guidance, they also talk about your overall absenteeism rate. So what does, if our average daily attendance in Heston is typically in a typical year is 97, 98+%. So are you seeing significant differences over a period of time in your average daily attendance? And this is not uncommon during the flu season. Our secretaries, I often go in and ask, how's our absences looking today? We're tracking that a lot during normal seasons where we have illness, but that's something that we would pay much closer attention to. So what we're doing right now, our county was actually ready to release a matrix that would reflect some of these metrics that would be specific to our county. They were ready to take that to the county commission this week. And then we found out that the State Department with KDHE was releasing their own, and we didn't want to contradict. We wanted to make sure we saw that first. So now that we have those, we'll be able to look forward to probably, I would assume, maybe next week, whatever our county matrix will be. And it'll have color coding, so we'll know whether we have 3 or 4 levels. We'll know what those primary metrics will be. And we'll know when we are to go on-site to hybrid to remote and what that looks like for different grade levels and different buildings. So that information is coming. There's some good ones out there. If you get a chance to look at Johnson County, and you can just Google Johnson County, I think they call it learning mode matrix. It's something that I think a lot of others and the state has based the things that they put together, they based it on Johnson County. So questions on that? We're hoping that comes out for us next week, and then as soon as it does, we'll get that information out to you. Mr. Stoppel?
The next question that we had would be on distance learning kids, would they be able to take the robotics class at the high school?
High school question.
So I don't know if I can answer that directly with a certain yes or no on that. I'm going to tell you one of the things that we're going to have to do is we're looking at remote and hybrid learning is, well, particularly with remote, is what courses can we just absolutely not do justice by offering them in a remote setting. And we have a handful of those that would be very hands-on types of courses. So for example, since we're right by our art room over here in the corner with Mrs. Hageman, it would be really hard to do ceramics as a remote course. So we might have to say to a kid, hey, you're going to need to choose a different elective course than that one if you're going to do remote learning. And I could go through and name a couple of other ones. Robotics, honestly, for us right now is probably a little bit on the border for us. There might be a context in which we are able to do that, and a context in which we are not able to do that. It would be a little bit harder for us to do that with a first-year student in the robotics program. It would be easier to do it, and I won't get into the nuances of all that, but it would be easier for us to do it with a returning student who has already taken a first-year robotics course with that, because we could do a little more self-directed work with that too. So I've got to be able to work with our instructors at the high school level a little bit more here in the first week that we are back. That's part of putting together our remote and hybrid plans of what exactly are those courses that we just absolutely would butcher them and do no justice if we tried to offer them in that manner. So I know that's not a great answer yet for that, but that's what we're going to have to work through here as our teachers start back tomorrow with that. Yes, go ahead. Yeah, so I'll repeat the question so the people on the video could hear that. So the question was I saying that if a family chose remote, and tell me if I butcher your question right here too, I'll do my best, but if a family chose remote, could they then choose to come on site for one course or two courses or whatever, like a band or robotics or something like that? So there would be potential for that for us at the high school. We would really have to sit down individually with each family to work through the details of that, because there'd be a number of logistical things that would arise from that we'd have to consider in that too. And so we're gonna really have to work case by case basis with that one. Yep. So to say, is there a chance? Yes, there's a chance on that one. Okay.
Mr. Stoppel, do you have more?
Oh, certainly, sir.
Okay.
On the many school districts are not doing masks for children in grades K through 5. Is this an option for Heston kids?
Yep, that's a really good question. I don't think any options are off the table because we're going to be guided by our county on all those things. And right now they're guided by, and it's referenced in our, in some of the things that we put out. I don't think we referenced it specifically in our plan, but executive order, the governor's executive order 2059, if you haven't seen that, Google that. And right now, that's the guidance that our county is choosing to follow. And that guidance would say that all students from K-12, that they would need to wear a mask. And so unless something changes at the county level, and then we would have to work through what those changes would be. But that's what we're being advised on right now. I don't know. I know that there are some boards who have chosen to not follow that, but I don't know the legalities of that. I would say right now that'd be difficult for us if our county's telling us one thing to not go with the county guidance just based on how we've structured things. But I believe there are school districts and there are counties who have voted to not follow some aspects of the governor's plan. I think most of the time it's masks. There's some other elements in that executive order, like temperature checks, which is something that on temperature checks, we're required to do that prior to kids entering the building based on that executive order. So until we get guidance from our county to not do those things, they would tell us why we shouldn't do those things, we'll follow that order. So that's our plan at this time.
The next question online was, on an AM/PM schedule, how do sports happen?
The same. I think sports would happen the same because most of those happen in the afternoon. And so, even if we do the AM PM with high school, we know that not all kids are driving and taking themselves places. So we'd have to adjust for transportation and all that. So there's a lot of logistical things we have to work out, but we would keep those activity schedules the same.
Next question, if you're releasing the hybrid model next Friday, how can families also decide by next Friday what they are going to choose?
Well, what we're asking you to choose is remote. So if you want to choose remote, we want to know by next Friday. If you said I absolutely couldn't choose anything by next Friday, we would say, well, let us know as soon as you can. But if we have the bulk of our people selecting the learning environment that works best for them by next Friday, that would be very helpful for us. Yes, sir. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Yes. Yes. And that's good clarification. I'm glad Mr. Rhodes is here. Yes, I will. So the question, and this came up a lot on the survey, is in the plan, you only present the option of on-site and remote. Where's the option of hybrid? And that's a very good question. And that gets into two things. Number one, the hybrid model is when we are needing to move to that learning environment because of whatever the county metrics we have indicate we need to reduce the number of kids in a location, such as a school or a classroom. Okay, so that's the model. That's the district-wide or building-wide hybrid model. People are also describing hybrid as I go or my children go to school part of the time and they're home part of the time. And I think the question that we had earlier speaks to at least how I would probably view that, and that is, do I have the ability to come to some classes and not to others? And I think there's maybe a variety of reasons why that would be attractive to some families who have the ability to have kids at home and at school. And that's what we're going to work towards. Going back to part of what we want to do is to provide the most flexibility we can, that we do want to provide that option. And I'll just walk through this real quick as we look at options. So understanding the time that we're in, we do want to provide as much flexibility to everyone that we possibly can. We would like for people who are planning to do remote, if you can make that decision by next Friday, that would help us just with planning. And I think a lot of people have committed, one way or the other. As far as the ability to kind of do, I'd call it kind of an individual hybrid. Can we come at certain times and not at other times? What we'd like to do there, if that's of interest to you, I call it kind of almost like an application process, because we want to know why and we want to know some of the details of that. We would need a commitment there, and there's probably going to be tighter parameters on that than any other options that we have, just because we want to make sure that that we're thinking about all the different considerations there. And so we're working through that right now, and we're not going to take that off the table. We're putting it on the table, but we want to work through the details, and then we'll get information to you. So we don't really have the hybrid option that you can go 1 or 2 days a week and stay home 1 or 2 days a week. We're looking at it from a district-wide perspective and then providing potentially the option of choosing specific classes that you may want your child to attend for a variety of reasons. We've actually done that with kids before. That's not something that's necessarily uncommon. It's just probably not as it's not as going to be as often used in the past as it would be now. So I hope that answers that question a little bit. Thanks for your help, Mr. Rhodes. Yes, sir. Go ahead. Yeah. So the question is, when we get the gating criteria and we look at the metrics to move from one learning environment to another, how much notice, I mean, how much time will people have to prepare? And the way I view it is most of that is not going to be super sudden. There's going to be trend data. We're going to know what data looks like over time. And the way I see it, and I think the way one of my buddies at the health department sees it, is that it may not be so black and white, that if you cross this line, that this is where you move. Because if you have an outbreak in Sedgwick, does that necessarily, and our positivity rate increases drastically, does that necessarily impact what we need to do, especially in an immediate sense in Heston? The county health department knows more specifics than they provide on their dashboard. And so being able to call them, that's where a phone call is going to be really important, and say, okay, what are we looking like here? I saw our numbers went up. We're collaborating, and I think that will allow us to make decisions or know what our decisions will be moving forward. I can't say that it wouldn't happen, that you would have shorter notice than we would like, but I don't think that's going to be common. So, yes, I believe that I believe we'll be able to do something different. I'm maybe not the authority on that, but I think based on the conversations I've had with the health department and our county superintendents have had, I would say that we'd want to apply context to those situations, because again, our county health department says we want kids to be in school. We recognize the downside of not having that, but we also know that there's a possibility we would need to do something different. So I could see us doing potentially something different than other districts, especially, Sedgwick's down the road a little bit. So, as an example. One thing just to mention real quick is we talk about those options again. We talked about how everybody has the opportunity if you choose to start remote. I think another question that comes up is, can I move in and out? Or what if I want to go remote at some point, or what if I want to come back to school at some point? And what you see a lot in other school plans is a commitment of maybe 9 weeks or a semester or something like that. We haven't solidified that. Again, with the intent that we want to provide flexibility and we want to give people the opportunity to do what they need to do. Our hope is we don't feel like it can be, a week by week. I'm going to decide, but we want people to know that after 2 weeks, maybe you started remote, you're feeling pretty good about things, or maybe we're in a hybrid mode, you feel a little bit better about that than if we were 100% in person. And you may call us and say, I'd like to consider my child coming to school in person or in that hybrid model. I feel comfortable with that. We want to be able to provide those opportunities. That's where working with our teachers, I mentioned that we start really digging in with teachers. We need to hear from them on a lot of those things too. And so the next couple of weeks as we work with them, we're going to be working through those kinds of questions. Because if I know anything, after being an administrator for a while now, we want to make sure our teachers keep their sanity. And that's important. So we want to make sure that the decisions that I make from that office over there don't diminish that number one goal, that we maintain that. So anyway, we'll work through those things, but I think we're going to try to provide options, especially early on, as people decide what's going to be best for them. I've violated a lot of rules of PowerPoint on this one. There's a lot of words up there, but we want to make sure that people know that we have a good handle in working with our county when we do have symptoms and we have exposure and potential positive cases in our school. So a question that comes up a lot is, a lot of us, we maybe have allergies, and so we're sneezing and coughing and doing all those things, and that's on the COVID list of symptoms. So what are we going to do when kids are doing that? We're going to call Nurse Tammy and have her make all the decisions when it comes to that. But we reached out. Part of my series of calls to the county health department today was to ask that question. What do we do when kids come in with symptoms? And they may be fine, it may be nothing, but they're coughing and sneezing and doing all those things. So he was able to, Toby from the health department was able to talk me through how we need to make those decisions. And I sent that information on to Nurse Tammy, and then we kind of do turn it over to her in a way. But there's some good guidance from KDHE on that, and recognizing what the major symptoms would be. You know, we've got some things in place right now with fever. So if your child registers 100-degree fever or more, we're probably going to give you a call and have you take that child home. And that'd be an example of something that we would continue to do. There's some other clinical features that KDHE has of symptoms that would, if you have multiple symptoms, would likely, we'd probably give you a call and say, you know, it may be a good time to come get your child. And we would always make that call. There was a call today into our office that there was concern that we would just haul them off to a testing site without notifying, and that's not something that we would do. We wouldn't do anything like that. We'd make sure to call a parent. This also describes what we would do if we did have a positive case. And that's more detailed in our plan, but we want to make sure that the process that we're following is the process that the county and KDHE has laid out for us. And you can read through that and I guess understand the steps that we would take, including a call to the county, including the type of communication we would have to all of you, the entire district, and to all of our staff if there were a positive case. We do a lot of assessment at that point, and all the way through we're working with our health department to do those things. Identifying who would be a close contact, that's another good vocabulary term. Household contacts are an important term. We learned a new phrase today, and I was reading this to Mr. Rhodes earlier today, but from our county health, we learned about a modified quarantine. And this would involve close contacts who are asymptomatic. So we're constantly learning more about the numbers of days that somebody might need to be isolated, or how we categorize people who are symptomatic versus asymptomatic. And we'll continue to build our plan based on that latest guidance. So I think we have the process because we're following recommendations from public health in our county. Very quickly, I want to share things that you're going to be seeing over the next couple of weeks as part of our ongoing communication. We know that our 70-something page, bullet by bullet, category by category plan is daunting. It's got a lot of information in it. It's a good base, but we could have probably doubled that in size. But we want to start creating, and we have been working on visuals for a lot of those features in that plan that are easier to access than going into a very large document. So we're working on some of those one-page visuals that are going to provide a quicker reference for terms that you need to know. So what does a close contact mean? You know, if I call you, or Nurse Tammy calls you, or the county health department and identifies your child as that, you want to know exactly what that means. Anybody know? Two numbers, 6 feet or less, 10 minutes or more. That's what creates a close contact. So if you're in that range with somebody for that period of time and they test positive, then you would be considered a close contact. Then you have to follow steps through KDHE and local health. So we want to provide that information in a way that's really easy to find and understand. We're going to talk a lot about just how we're going to provide social and emotional supports. And if I didn't talk so much, I'd let Dawn share some of that, but I'm going way over time. But you'll see a lot more information on that. The gating criteria we talked about will hopefully come out next week. Some things that we want to do before school begins. A lot of people asked about like freshman orientation or new student orientation at the middle school, and we're going to provide some of those opportunities before. Our hybrid learning environment schedule, you're going to see that and see the details of what those things will look like and where your child might be and all those things. Wireless internet options. So Phil Unruh has been working on that to make sure there's some good options through some of the internet service providers we're finding, but we also want to provide some options for people that need that as well. And so we're working on some of those things, and we'll have information on that. Specific plans about buildings. So you've seen kind of the district, the umbrella plan, but what is that going to look like at the elementary school? What is the end of the day out front of the elementary school going to look like? Because that is a mass gathering of 500 people or more. That's on the KDHE list. We can't have that. Just the quarantine and separation guidelines, that's a lot of the information that we received earlier today. We want to make sure we get that information out to you. We hear a lot about air filtration, HVAC units, and what do those look like in Heston? You know, what is our filtration system? And we want to provide some of that information, and our operations director, Les, is working on that, and he's gotten me a lot of information. He has to draw a lot of pictures and, you know, explain things to me, but we'll get that out to you very soon. And then we have another community meeting coming up on August 27th. And by that point, we will have our plan, our schedules, everything ready to go. That's a little less than a week before school starts. And so that'll be another opportunity to engage, and we will have a lot of things worked out that right now are coming over the next week or so. I want to show you real quick, and Phil, do you have the ability to click on that link? I want to make sure everybody knows where we house information on our website. So if you go to hestonschools.org, click on that main page there, Phil. Take us to the district site. So if you go to the district site, you'll see that banner page there, and you'll see that link that says back to school information. You also see that we're having a community meeting tonight at 6 o'clock. If you click on the back to school information, that's going to take you to just kind of a table where you can find a lot of different links that are probably pretty handy, and that's going to grow over the next few days. We're also creating something similar at each building site. So if you go to the high school site or the middle school site, you're going to see a lot of the same information, but some of that information will be building specific. But on that page, you'll find our new calendar. We were supposed to start school today. If you're looking at the old calendar, you would see that. Our new calendar is up there, just general updates that we're doing. Phil, can you find the Harvey County dashboard over on the right? So this is an important site, you know, as you think about the county having a lot of influence over the things that we do. We want to make sure that you're aware that on this site you'll see some of the data that we look at with the county. So this is all Harvey County data, and you can see just numbers of tests, total case numbers, that positivity rate. We talked about how that positivity rate influences the threshold, or the threshold that causes us to move from one learning environment to another. The number of active cases, anybody know what it was less than 24 hours ago? 28. So it was 28, and now it's 18. So oftentimes we see a number of new positive cases, but we see a reduction because people have met whatever the recovery criteria would be. So that number can fluctuate quite a bit. If you there's a handy daily testing bar graph there in orange and yellow that shows you what daily testing looks like, and it shows you the number of tests, and then the smaller, hopefully usually the smaller part of that bar graph is the positive tests. And then if you go down below, and you can scroll through some things that show you hospitalization numbers and all that as well. At the bottom are some dials that the county has created. They're working to create a kind of a summary as well that would take into consideration all of the elements on this. But I think it's a pretty handy way to keep track, and they update it daily with new information. You know, so as that criteria comes out, you can kind of stay ahead of the game to say, you know, kind of back to Luke's question about how much notice would we have, you can start to pay attention to things like what's the trend line, what's the positivity rate, and start to get a better idea of if we are looking at potentially moving to a different learning environment. So thanks, Phil. Clint, other questions? And I'm going to ask our other principals to come on up so that they can answer building specific questions as those come up too.
This first one might be more of a high school question, Mr. Rhodes. Have you considered e-gaming as a way for students to connect and communicate? Wichita is putting in an e-gaming program that includes Minecraft and other online games for students to interact in.
I don't know a lot about e-gaming. I played a video game for about 10 minutes with my son last night, and that's about the extent of my knowledge on that. I think I've actually been hit with a couple of ideas from kids in the last either week or few months kind of leading up to the year of ideas for kind of clubs and programs for kids. I would say we're not opposed to anything like that. We'd have to figure out what's the best way to manage that, and how do we sponsor that, and who sponsors that, and how do we get kids involved, and those kinds of things. So always got to work through the logistics of those. And if there's a demand for it and resources that can accommodate that demand, then we can try to see what we can do. But I'm saying all those things with the caveat of I'm the least knowledgeable person definitely in this room and perhaps in this town on anything esports as well. So
the next online question was, will Heston teachers be assigning Acellus lessons?
can you repeat that, Clint?
Will Heston teachers be assigning the Acellus lessons?
Yes, would be the answer to that question. We get trained next week as a district with that. We have a little bit of familiarity just in wanting to purchase that and kind of looking into it, but we officially get trained next week. But I think it's important to distinguish. We are not wanting to we're not wanting this online curriculum to be this online academy where all these kids are kind of just invisible to us, and they're just doing something, and they're still kind of enrolled with us, but they're off in their own little world, doing their own little thing, and we'll see them in May. That is not going to be our approach at all. Our teachers are going to be assigned those kids. They're going to still be managing their education and figuring out, okay, this is where this student is at, and I'm going to assign them this lesson, and here's the instruction that would go along with that. So it's not we're just shoving them into the corner kind of a system. We're going to be very involved with that. I think that's our approach, and I think I would speak for all three buildings in saying that.
One of the requirements of remote learning, as it's defined for us, is daily interaction with teachers. So yes, we will utilize Acellus as a supplemental tool, but kids will connect every day with a teacher, and in some cases will connect with actual things that are happening if you have the ability to do that in school in real time, and that's what we want to work through. So but there will be, yes, it'll be very teacher directed. Yes, ma'am.
I can answer that. We've been talking through that as well. I think our
Can you give the people online the question?
Oh, I can. Yes. Will parents and students be able to see what classrooms look like prior to school starting? And I can answer that as yes. Teachers have been talking through maybe doing meet the teacher in a Zoom kind of format, but also doing some recording and videoing of what the classroom looks like, sending that out. We've even talked about creating what does it look like when you come to school, because it'll look different with people wearing masks and temperatures being taken. How is the building set up a little bit different, and what are some things to look forward to or changes that you might see in a day? So we've been putting our heads together to help ease some of those thoughts and concerns that families might have, but we'll be pushing those things out prior to school starting.
And was your question though also if your students was your question if a kid is choosing remote learning, and how do they do that, or was that what you were speaking to? Yeah. Oh, gotcha. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Gotcha. Okay. The question was, how do we plan to do the temperature checks in the morning when all the kids are coming. The easy answer is do it as fast as we can, so we can get them through there. The complicated answer is we've got to probably communicate home with home. So I'm thinking total high school right here. Okay, so in our context with this, kind of what the flow of traffic of coming to school is. I'll probably be communicating with families. You know, if you need to be here for such and such an activity, here's a time to arrive. If you don't need to be here for those things, here's a better time to arrive. So we kind of think about flow of traffic. That's still not going to solve all of it. A lot of it's going to be is that we're going to need more than one person out front in order to accomplish that. So it's going to be multiple people, so we can keep the flow of traffic coming in pretty quick with that as well. And then we've talked through those procedures for maintaining kind of the crowd control in the building once we get into. So that maybe doesn't give every detail on that, but it's going to take many people. It's going to take multiple of their thermometers to get that done in an efficient manner with us for that. So if there's any volunteers that want to show up every morning to do that, that'd be great.
I've got two questions that are fairly similar online, and I'll read them both, and then I think we can probably answer them all in one. The first one was, can kids move between remote and in-person learning at will? And the second question would be, if kids opt for remote learning and COVID numbers go down, is there any opportunity to return to on-site learning before the end of the semester?
Yeah, I think I'll take that one. I think I'll answer the second question, which was if students start remote and then, like Mr. Proctor was mentioning, for whatever reason start to feel a little bit more comfortable and the numbers are looking a little bit more or in their favor, could we come back to school in person? The answer is definitely yes to that. The first question was, can we move back and forth? I probably echo, I think, a theme that I heard from Mr. Proctor is our district's taking a really big approach to, we want to be flexible and we want to do whatever we can within our resource and within our means to meet families' needs. And we know there are families' needs that are across the spectrum right now, and we want to do what we can. The way you read that, Mr. Stoppel, almost makes me think like, are we almost asking like, could it change every single day? Like I'm in person on Monday and then I'm remote. I think we want to avoid situations where it's this extreme back and forth. I would probably have some educational reasons why that might not be a good situation. But I think based on the situation, we want to be really flexible. And could there be some in and out of that over the course of extended amounts of time? I think there could be probably a very individual situation, and we would work with individual families, again, to meet their needs in that way. So there might be some limitations on that, but we want to do whatever we can do to meet your needs. And that's been a big theme for us on our side, just as we're moving into that.
It's elementary school related. Okay. In years past, parents have provided or helped provide snacks for the classrooms and birthday party, things like that. Do we know how those things, if they're going to be able to continue, or what might happen? The question was related to snacks that would be brought into classrooms, birthday treats that are. That's a big and important part of the elementary. Yes, we will accept snacks. I think we've talked through the range from do they have to be individually packaged to can the teacher who has gloved hands be distributing them. I think we will go that route just because of cost for families, that we can take some of those safety precautions and still distribute snacks in a safe way without having children doing that, whether that be some sort of an adult in the classroom. In regards to birthday treats, that would look maybe a little different. We probably won't be having parents come in to do birthday parties, but you're welcome to bring treats, and those would be distributed in a way to the classroom. So we would ask that you bring that to the office, and then we'll get it to the classroom or send it with your child. Those we do ask be individually packaged, just to help with some of the allergy issues that we might be having and so forth. So that would be probably our first choice there.
The next question I had from online was, can you confirm security would not be an issue for locations that may happen on other facilities that are other than the school, such as doors being locked and visitor regulations?
That was one of the things that, as we toured facilities this week, we definitely looked into. And I believe that all of the locations that we've visited had doors that locked once they were closed. Safety was a top priority there in all of those locations for safe securities while people are in church, but those will also relate to students being in the building.
Yeah, well, so I will echo that, but I also, I'll just put a plug in. It has nothing really to do with her comment other than to say, I think both Mrs. Crable and I were just incredibly impressed with the places we got to go to yesterday, a couple of churches, and just the willingness to do whatever they could do to help our situation. And it's just incredible. I think I've always known that. I have always known that about our community, but it was just confirmed in a really big way yesterday with the churches that we visited. And I know there's other churches who've been in contact that we haven't been able to be in contact to. So we just have we have an incredible place, and we are all in this together. And it was very evident yesterday. By structure, help me. Yeah. We have spent a lot of time thinking about spit in band. It's been interesting. The first thing I would say is, if you're familiar with our middle school band room and then the high school band room here, those are obviously bigger classrooms. We were a little bit concerned if they would actually be big enough to separate our students out and social distance them. They are. We had to kind of get creative there a little bit, as in a lot of classrooms, but they are. We are, the other things we talked about today, Mr. Proctor mentioned, we sat down with Mr. Graverson today. We're looking at just the way air movement is working through there. One of the suggestions from the music teachers in Kansas, I guess these are called puppy pads. I don't know if you're familiar with those, but they're the absorbent pads that you put down on your floor. So when you're potty training your new dog at home, it absorbs all the whatever puppies put down there, I guess. And so we are looking into using those, and then I think they're disposable. So when you drop spit, it drops onto that, and then you just throw those away. Band and choir are higher risk activities, and so there are some specialized sorts of health and safety kinds of things that we're going to be doing in there too, besides some of the ones that I just mentioned right there. Another kind of interesting one, you just don't think about these things till you have to, is we're buying basically masks for instruments is the only way I know how to describe that, but especially like brass instruments that kind of go over the bell of those instruments. Again, who would have thought we would have been having that conversation, a while back? I also learned that the petite little flute is like the most ferocious of COVID kind of instruments, because Mr. Graverson started explaining this to me. When you blow a flute, or when you make a flute sound, I was not a flutist, you're blowing straight across, and that's, putting all that air right there. So we talked about, maybe some flutes need some special barriers and things like that. So he seems to have a handle on all of those things for band.
So yeah, we met with Mr. Graverson today. So also big kudos to Mr. Graverson, because he's already thought of all these things. So he understands the challenge, and he's already bringing the solutions to things too. So we really appreciated that from him. And space is part of that too. And so we'll have to do some different things in order for us to have enough room to spread kids out. So we were talking about storage and having to move some things out of there too. So we'll be able to provide the appropriate space for kids in there, which is a big part of that as well for us. And he's already got the solutions to a lot of those things, like the slobber and that kind of stuff for us as well. So he's done a really great job with that.
I have a bus question for you. Does the district plan to have more buses to limit the number of students per bus?
We are working on that now. So after enrollment, we finished up with alternative enrollment date today. So each year we start analyzing bus routes and just numbers and all those things. So the transportation department is doing that now, and we'll determine what we need to do based on the need, transportation need, and all those things, and we'll communicate accordingly. So that process will happen now, and everything is on the table as far as considerations go. There's been a lot of guidance provided on transportation, whether it's in a bus or any school vehicle, and so we'll follow that. But one of those requirements right now is that, in our county would say, the most important thing is that you get airflow on a bus. So roll those windows down, and when the weather allows, wear masks, social distance as much as you can on a bus, and so we'll follow those same guidelines.
The next question I have for you is for the high school. Will kids at HHS be moving between classes at the same time, or will they be staggered to keep the hallway numbers low? Probably would go for any building.
Right, so that probably functions in a little different way in our building than it does in the others, for sure, with that. I guess I'll say right now, we've had to adjust our bell schedule in order to add a few minutes. All buildings have had to add a few minutes into their day because we've shortened our year. Now, that's not answering the question, but we've had to change that a little bit. And with that, we have taken out some components in our day that would increase the opportunity for kids to gather in a large group in a really small space. Okay, so one of those would be like a break time where there was a more extended passing period between a couple of our classes, and we've eliminated that, because at that time what we're going to see is kids huddled up in masses because they're kids and they want to talk to their friends, right? And so we just can't do that right now. As far as staggering right now, we don't have something in place for that. Our expectation will be absolutely 100% during a passing period in the hallway, you do wear your mask, okay? And the actual definition of close contact that we're working with here from the health experts, we have a 3-minute passing period. Some kids move a very short distance, some move a little bit longer distance, but it's a 3-minute passing period, and we're masks on, and if we pass by each other in the hallway, that's not considered close contact for us. So that's how we're operating right now with our passing periods, and I'm anticipating wearing the mask is going to be the biggest part of that. That's a thing that I'm just going to have to be very frank with kids about the first day of school, about what the expectation is on that. But that's how we kind of work through that with our building leadership team.
2 terms, and then I'll let Mr. Heinrichs and Ms. Crable, because that's an important question, and transitions are a part of our plan, and specifically what that looks like at each building is going to be important. But the terms incidental and infrequent are important terms to know as you talk about just how close contacts or just people interact in general. And so you see a lot of times that you don't want to violate the 6-foot rule. You only do that incidentally or infrequently as much as possible. So those are 2 terms to become familiar with as well.
To add just a little context before I kind of get into the specifics, it probably helps to kind of know middle school schedule just a little bit. Some of you are, I'm sure, familiar with that. 5th and 6th grade essentially follow the same schedule 5th graders and 6th graders do, as well as then 7th and 8th graders have essentially the same schedule, or at least typically they do. It also probably helps to kind of understand the setup at the middle school. If you kind of picture 5th grade is sort of off by itself, and then 6th, 7th, and 8th grade classrooms are very intermixed, kind of down that north-south hallway there. So what we've done is 5th and 6th grade still have a similar schedule. They're going to transition as classes to the very next class without going to lockers. We feel like we can do that because they're already separated just naturally by distance. 7th and 8th grade, it's a little bit trickier, and so we've adjusted the class schedule for them, and we've staggered the releases of their core classes. Again, they won't go back to their lockers in between core classes. We're going to let them get there, go to their lockers before school starts, grab everything that they need for their core classes, but then they would be staggered in between classes so that classes would never be in the hallway with students from other classes. We can't do that for Encore because for most of our Encore classes, 7th graders are with 8th graders, same with 5th and 6th graders. So we can do that for core classes really easily. Can't do it as well for Encore classes in the afternoon. So we're going to rely on masks. We're going to be really good about, we're going to stay on the right. We're going to get to classes. In the past, sometimes teachers have lined up students outside their doorway as students are coming from all sorts of places to that class. We're going to get them right into that room so there's not any sort of gathering outside that door. Little things like that we think can help with that too.
At the elementary, transitions predominantly happen during wheel transition time. And we too have talked through or are in the process of working through kind of a rotation of how you would move from class to class. Talking about putting arrows on the floor so that students know which directions, on which side of the hallway they would need to stand and so forth. At the elementary, we were also talking about appropriate social distancing spots on the wall to help guide students in staying appropriately apart from one another. And then as well as our lunch and recess, that has been modified as well. Typically that has been 2 grade levels eating lunch and at recess at the same time. We have modified that schedule so that 1 grade level will be eating at a time while 1 grade level will be outside for recess. It extends our lunch and recess time just a bit, but we feel like it's important to allow that spacing to occur and for students to stick together with what we would reference as their cohort group or their grade level group so that we can keep our tracing and our contacts pretty limited there.
I'm going to jump in just really quick and then I'll give it to you. Mrs. Crable mentioned lunch at the elementary school looking a little bit different, similar at the middle school. Again, some of you are familiar with our gymnasium and the stage. We're going to use the stage as a second cafeteria. So we'll have 1 grade level in our typical cafeteria and another grade level on the stage that allows us to spread students out when they're eating.
So I'm going to anticipate a question based on what I said and then how Mr. Heinrichs, I don't know, answered the question there because I just said, we're going to make it mandatory for kids to wear masks in there, but we're going to try to run our passing periods the same. And then what he shared was, hey, we can have 5th graders go at one time and 6th graders go at one time during that. So I'm going to anticipate a question here. Well, why didn't the high school guy just say, we're going to have 9th graders go and then have 10th graders go and 11th graders go and then 12th graders go? And the reason that doesn't function that way in our building, we wouldn't actually end up holding class or having instructional time in our building because so many of our classes would be a mixed grade level class. There's some of them that would be the same. So like a 9th grade English class is going to be 9th graders. Okay, but at the same time 9th grade English is going on, there's 20 other classes and most of those are mixed grade level with that. And we would literally eliminate all of our instructional time in class. And that's why we're going with the premise of our mandate is mask in the hallway. When you go in the hallway, you got to wear mask. And we're working from that infrequent and incidental moments of coming in close contact with each other with that as well. Since everybody talked about lunch, I guess I'll say lunch with us as well. We actually already have some pretty good procedures in place that are going to help us with lunch because we already have those procedures in place. When our kids come into the lunchroom, they go to a table first and don't just all go get in line. So we've been doing that for years. Okay, and that eliminates sprinting down the hall to be first in line. It eliminates cutting in line. It eliminates I'm a senior and you're a freshman, so thank you, buddy. I'm just going to step in. So we kind of take care of some of that stuff by doing that. So we'll have that same procedure in place. The thing that will be different for us is our tables are set up to have 6 chairs at them. That would keep us pretty close. We'll only have half capacity at tables for lunch in order to do that, which might mean we have to add some other folding tables out and some of our other open floor space in order to accommodate all the bodies that need to be in there. At the lunchtime, we can spread out over a pretty darn big area here in our building in order to do that. And we will just like we've always done, this table, this table, this table, we'll be able to go get up in the line. We'll be able to manage some space in line in order to do that. For high school kids, they were always able just to get their main entree, go to the a la carte, which would have the fruits and vegetables, scoop their own with that. That will be managed for them this year. They're not going to like that because that's what you did in elementary school, but that's just going to be a thing that we're going to have to do here for a little bit. They will come through the line. They will have hand sanitizer. If they would like to eat that day, they're going to need to do the hand sanitizer before they come through the lunch line. They'll have their mask on through the lunch line, be able to get their food. They can sit down, take mask off, eat their food, go dump tray, and sit there at their table and chat a little bit before they can go on to their next class. So I think we've got some good procedures there in place how we're going to be able to manage that as well.
At the elementary, Mrs. Funk has done a really great job of doing research and again, networking with professionals in the field. And so she has worked hard to do social distancing with her class and spacing out chairs and locations for children to sit. They will wear their masks during singing time, but she is working also in her curriculum to do lots of rhythm, composition, maybe not just everything that requires singing, but they still would be actively engaged with music education and learning. So.
Yeah, so question was looking at limits on size of crowds at our events. Most notably, we got football, volleyball that are started team sports that are a little bit bigger crowd sizes with that. There was, I think Mr. Proctor mentioned it earlier, of there was the 500, you have to quarantine if you were in a mass gathering of greater than 500. So was that today that came out, or was it yesterday? Days run together. It was sometime in the last 24 hours that came out, right? And so how that impacts us right now as a school, we don't know exactly yet. I can tell you everything that we've done in which a crowd has been involved or kids coming to our building have been involved. We did a lot of things over the summer, including a graduation that had a lot of people at it. We ran all that through Harvey County Health Department with good detail, so they understood really what we were doing with that to get the okay on, move forward with that or not move forward with that. So there's some other kind of expectations that are coming at us now with that. So it's a little hard to tell at this point. I can tell you from my standpoint, if we're going to have school, we need to have student activities. I'm a very strong believer in that. And so we want to do that in the very best possible way that we can. If our kids can compete in any way, shape, or form, I'm okay with whatever we need to do crowd-wise, but hopefully we can have as big a crowd as we possibly can whenever it's okay to do that. But we're going to try to work within what the health department advises us on that too. Do you have a particular building you'd want
to? I don't know that there's a specific number of minutes. Yes, thank you. Thank you for that reminder. What are the criteria for when a child would need a mask break, or about how long will they be in a mask before they can get a break? Teachers are very aware that children will need breaks. And what I would really encourage and what I've talked with teachers about is if you're seeing a student really struggling, that might be an opportunity for them just to take a walk with someone, go take a break, go get a drink, just anything to maybe do a state change for them. That's not necessarily that we have a certain number of minutes that they have to, and then you can have a break. But if we are in the hall passing, we would encourage that you have your mask on. But if you are in the room and we've just come in from recess, that's going to be a time where we're going to need to have a break. And so there's going to be some really logical times in the day where that's going to be. We also know that, like when read aloud's happening, that would be an optimal time to spread out and take a little breather from your mask so that you can kind of refocus or regroup. So teachers are super aware of that. They also are very aware that we may need to do some teaching about what it looks like and how does it work, and because there may be children who have not been exposed to that yet. So I'm going to put a plug in. If you haven't started working with mask wearing with your children, it's now time to do that, and start in small doses and work your way up, because they will be asked to wear them all throughout the day. I would also encourage you to have multiple masks in a backpack, or that they would have multiple masks in a day. Little people, get them dirty. And after lunch, they often are full of, whatever's left on their face that they haven't washed off. So I would encourage you to just be thinking about how can we make that work for them to be as successful as possible prior to school starting. But then we will definitely support them. If there's a mask that gets dirty and they don't have an extra, we'll work to have extras in the office and in the classrooms, so that we can support kiddos with that.
And at the middle school, I know our teachers are really interested in giving mask breaks to their kids, because who else gets a break when the students are outside or something? It's the adults too. And if you've not worn a mask for a long period of time, like even as an adult, it's just nice to get a breath of fresh air and to take a big breath, I found myself. So those are needed for our adults too, and I think those will definitely happen.
Yeah, so high school, I just talked a little bit about that. Also, they're going to have them on during a passing period too. As the orders state right now, they have to have them on in a classroom setting. So even I'll just throw out some random numbers here, but even if we have a class of 5 kids and they're in a 500 square foot room, right now the order states they have to have a mask on because they're in a classroom setting. Okay, so we know that the breaks are going to be really important. In that, we talked a lot about that the other day in our building leadership team meeting of good ways to go about that. And I'm going to encourage our teachers to be feel very free and willing every hour to, teachers are pretty close proximity to an outside door. Get outside for 5 minutes and take a break, take the mask off. I know right now I've about reached my peak right now too for needing it. And you take it off, and my goodness, that air conditioning feels amazing too, doesn't it, when you get it off your face? But and we have some space in the building that we'll kind of designate too. You can take a group and really spread out there and safely then remove the mask for that too. So we want that to happen a lot, because everybody, kids and adults, need that too. And I'll have some specific things for our staff. It's your planning period. Just shut your door, take your mask off because you're working by yourself. Do that at that time, because you need to do that too. So yeah.
I think another thing that probably teachers at all buildings are thinking about, not that it's probably going to happen on a daily basis, is just looking for times when they can actually teach outside and take in big groups, outside for extended periods of time. And I think we're really supportive of that too.
At this point, we are planning to be outside and playing. Children will need to do that. They will not need to be wearing their masks during that time. We also feel like that kids will be cleaning hands on the way out and cleaning hands on the way in. We were working really hard to put lots of opportunities in to wash hands, because we know that we can't disinfect the playground equipment before the next group would come out. So we're going to be practicing a lot of that hand washing and hand sanitizing and those types of things as we've come in from recess or before we're going out. We are in the process of purchasing lanyards for the children so that they can put their lanyard on or tuck it into their shirt when they're outside for recess or in a place. We definitely want them to be safe out there. So there'll be some, I'm sure, teachers are pretty creative in how can we keep children safe, even if we have their mask on a lanyard, so that that's not becoming a problem too. So, and hand washing is, I think it says to do every hour, and so teachers are working hard to try to figure out how we're going to put that in and where, and which doors do we go out of, and which are the exit doors and which are our entrance doors, so that we can keep some of those things down. They need to play.
I have a device question for you from the online community. The question was, if we have to go to remote learning at some point in time during the year, at-home learning, would there be enough devices for students, and would there be a possibility of those devices being handed out at the beginning of the year?
Yeah, we had a big push on that last spring. We've actually purchased, I don't know how many more devices, but a bunch is the word. Is that a technical amount of a lot of computers is known as a bunch? So I can speak to the middle school. We've not done this until this year, but every student is going to have an individual Chromebook as the device. Now, we're not going to let those Chromebooks go home until we would need to go to a remote situation, but every student is only going to be using their own device, which just helps with some of the personal hygiene sorts of issues. But for sure, if we would go remote, those would go home, and we'd make arrangements to do that.
So just, very quickly, Greg mentioned it. We have enough devices ordered for every kid to have one. The problem with a lot of things is they take a little while to get in right now. So Phil Unruh, our tech director in the back, has taken care of that, and we're hoping to get those in. We think we'll be able to make do in the short term, and then within the next few weeks, we would have enough for all kids. So. Go ahead, Mike. Yeah. Well, we just haven't been able to talk about that yet, I think, because we're preparing for what the current numbers look like and all that, and what school will look like early on. I'm looking forward to when we can have those conversations. I tend to try to be very optimistic with that as well. I'm sorry. Yes. So the question was, is there going to be a point where we can talk about, it's harder than you think. Somebody told me that. Make sure you repeat the question. Is there going to be a point where we're talking about reducing some of the mitigation strategies that we have to have in place, like mask wearing? And I'll tell you, that particular issue, and I know everybody's getting tired and we need to wrap up here pretty quick, but that's been the hardest topic. As I've talked to just a lot of people who have concerns about, the fact that we're going to not just mask, but all the things. Are we going to create an environment where it's just not going to feel good to be there? And it is a valid concern, and that's why, going back to what we talked about at the outset, how intentional we are about creating that environment despite all these things that we have to do, I believe, for a short amount of time. I believe that we can create that environment because of the people that we have. And if these things that I don't like at all allow us to do the things that we want to do, let's do them for a while, while we need to. But let's take care of kids and love kids like we always have, even more so than we ever have. And I think it's going to be okay. And we want to work with your kids, and we believe that although we cannot eliminate risk, we know that if we're doing certain things, it reduces that, and that's what we're committed to doing. But I know the mask issue is tough, but I do look forward to, Mike, when we can talk about getting rid of some of the things that we're having to do. So it'll come. What else, Mr. Stoppel?
One of the questions that we've received was, how many COVID cases in a school would it take for that school to go to remote learning?
Yeah, that's a good question. We don't have a number. I think it goes back to does it look like there's transmission inside the school? I think that's when the county, when we were talking through that, that's one thing that they identified as a point where you have concern. But they've said that if we have a case, it does not necessarily mean that everything has to shut down. It may, and that's why we work with them directly. We give them good information, then we have good information to operate on. But there isn't necessarily an established number right now. So, anything else?
A question about substitute teachers. Has the school district secured substitute teachers, as teachers are most likely going to be close contacts of any testing positive students?
We have a group of substitute teachers, and it's a great question and a great topic, and it'll be a singular topic in our plan. One thing that we're planning on doing is having a full-time sub in each building, meaning somebody that's going to be there every day. And they will be able to support in a lot of different areas, including if, somebody needs to go home or whatever. But that's one thing that we haven't done in the past. This is the very last slide that we have, and it's pertinent to that. We're going to receive, and maybe you've read in the newspaper, that there are County CARES Act dollars available, and we went through a process through a committee where we were able to create a list of priorities where we could utilize some of those county dollars, and that's one of the things that we want to do. And there's I'll read through these so everybody is aware. A lot of those dollars are going to remote learning infrastructure technology that we need in the classroom as we make adjustments and those types of things. Off-site facility needs, so as we think about potentially utilizing off-site facilities, how do we take care of additional cleaning, rental costs, all those types of things. So that's addressed in that plan. Additional cleaning and disinfecting supplies. PPE that we need. We're also looking at an assistant for Nurse Tammy. We imagine that she might be a little bit busy, and so we want to support her because she can't clone herself. There's only one, and there's 3 buildings to get to. Hand sanitizer, which I think we're good on, actually. If anybody has beat us per capita in hand sanitizer, I'd like to see them. Some of it smells okay, and some of it's just awful. But substitute teacher support was the one I was mentioning. Having, not only those people on site every day, but building that capacity. You may have read an article in the Wichita Eagle about how Wichita has seen actually an increased number of people who are applying to be subs. We've actually had more interest as well in substitute teachers, not to the degree that they have, but we've had a number of calls and additional people that have gotten on that list and applied. So work with substitute teachers is going to be a little bit different. We have some great long-term subs that we've used in our district, and we plan to continue to use them, but additional training prior to the start of school is going to look different. And we're going to walk through that and establish dates for that here very soon. So, yes, we are very well aware of our need for subs. One more.
The question is, are teachers being expected to teach both face-to-face and remotely within the same classes?
I might need a little clarification, which will be hard right now on that question, but I'm going to interpret that a couple of different ways. Let's say I'm algebra teacher in my first hour algebra class. I happen to have several kids who are in-person instruction and 3 whose families have chosen remote with that. I could interpret that question as in, are we going to have those kids Zoom in to the class at that time, or is it just simply that the teacher is expected to teach these kids and then also be teaching the online or remote kids separately with that? We've got to work through it. The answer is yes, the teacher is the teacher for both of those kids. The delivery might have to be a little bit different for those kids. That's why we're trying to give some teachers some different tools. If the question was directed at, are we going to have kids Zoom in every class period, I would have some question marks on doing that, and I wouldn't go into every detail right now because I'll talk forever on that. There's going to be some challenges with that. So we just know that for those remote learners, some of that instruction and work is going to be delivered in a little bit different manner at times for those kids. The balance with that is what my concern is. as we kind of move through all these different models. I've talked about this with our teachers is I don't want our teachers to teach from 8 to 3:25. Many of them go to practice then from 3:30 to 5:30, and then they get home and eat dinner, and they do night school from 6 o'clock to 11 o'clock. So we aren't going to have anybody left if we do that. And that's why we're trying to give people some tools in order to facilitate that in a better manner for our remote learners with that. So I don't know if I hit the essence of the question on that or not.
There's a follow-up on that one, Mr. Rhodes.
Okay.
It is about teachers having to plan and implement more plans than they would normally be required.
Well, I mean, yeah, it is. That's a little bit why we're, okay, so the follow-up question was, are teachers going to have to plan more than they would have normally? Is that what it was there? Okay. Yeah, they are in a lot of ways. That's also why we tried to front load a lot of our days here up front, because we know right now we need to prepare for remote. We know there's a chance we need to prepare for hybrid, and we also know we got a whole bunch of them coming on September 2nd. So we can front load a lot of that work. What we don't want to have happen is what we had happen last spring, where all of a sudden governor made an announcement and we just had to figure it out right then. Okay, and context was different, piecing together the end of a year as opposed to delivering an entire course with that too. So that's a big reason why we have these days on the front, so we give teachers a lot of time. We're not, I think I can speak for all of us, we're not structuring a bunch of specific meetings and trying to structure all that time and just keep them in meetings. Like a bunch of this is work with your subject team and work in your classroom, and here's what we got to be prepared for. To facilitate with kids with that. But yeah, yes, absolutely, it is. It absolutely is, and that's why we're trying to approach that a little bit different as we start the year.
I can't say that I've spoken with a lot of high school teachers or elementary teachers, a few, but have had a chance as teachers have started to come back this week, and especially today, the school is pretty busy with teachers coming back. I've had a chance to just impact, how are you feeling about the year? You ready to go? And by and large, which the typical answer is yes on any year. It is that plus 100-fold this year. And I was kind of wondering myself as we're kind of getting close to the school year starting, like how are our people going to be feeling about starting the year? And I can't speak to every single individual, but the teachers we have this year are, at least middle school, and I'm going to say elementary and high school too, we are ready. Everybody knows it's going to be a challenge. Of course it's going to be a challenge, but we are up to that challenge. It has been really, really fun to have some of those conversations with people. So, yep, it's going to be a challenge, and we're going to get it done.
I've been encouraging grade level teams to work together on that because about each teacher will be having probably at least one remote student. And so the idea would be is what you would be teaching and in planning for your daily instruction with your on-site students. Then how can we use the knowledge that we gain from the spring? How can we use the knowledge that we are gaining with Acellus, that platform, and put together strong instruction for those remote students? I encourage those teachers to work together so that they can, so it's more heads together, working together to create instruction that will meet everybody's need.
Mrs. Crable, we had another question, just jump in there for you about elementary school extension groups, like the reading extension groups. Are those extra adults still coming into the schools?
We will continue to have our aides and our paras helping out with like our Title I resources and intervention times. In regards to having reading volunteers, those would be more limited. We're just going to have to take those on a case-by-case basis, but we will have all of our paras and our staff personnel that have been there before, and a few new faces that will be joining us this year. So we will be able to meet those Title I needs.
If a student has a fever or other symptoms, will they be required to stay remote for 14 days?
Okay, good question. It probably depends. So a fever is kind of a big one, as far as symptoms go. And as we talk to the county health department, what they would say is that if your child has a fever, in the stage that we're in right now, it's probably not a bad idea just take them in to the doctor and just get that checked out. And if a doctor says, let's monitor it for a day, let's see how the fever, what happens with the fever, and they can dictate. They become the authority. That doctor becomes the authority on the amount of time they're out. So if they determine it's something else that you don't have to worry about, COVID, it's something else, and they say, I feel comfortable after 2 days that fever's gone or whatever, we would let that doctor then become the authority on that particular issue. And that was something, again, that we touched base with county health on. I think I was one of today's questions. That may have been yesterday's question. But. One other thing I'll mention here is Clint's finalizing our question list. The challenge, one of the challenges we have is a limited capacity to test and to get quick results. That's something that, as part of that CARES Act committee with the county, that they paid special attention to and want to build that capacity to be able to get quicker results, to get more capacity to test more people, that could help with a lot of these questions about longevity and being out. That includes both kids and teachers. And so there's some good plans for that. Supplies are hard to come by. Testing supplies are hard to come by, but that's something that I know our county's very committed to.
The next question I had was, if a teacher has a fever or other symptoms, will they be required to stay home for 14 days? And if so, can they teach from home if they feel up to it?
So the same kind of thing, we would probably at this point, if you've got a fever and it's hanging on especially, probably check with your doctor and get some advice there. It does make me think maybe of a different issue, and that is some of our staff, or students too, but maybe focus on staff who are in a vulnerable category, health-wise, compromised in some way. And we know who those folks are. We're working with them, and we will give them every accommodation that they need. And that could include doing some things from home if need be, based on those needs. We've had some individual conversations with people on that. And, right now, for the most part, people feel pretty good about strategies we put in place, where things are, as a county and locally. But that's something that we're paying very close attention to, and that applies to both staff and students as well. That's, as you look at reopening guidelines, whether it's a CDC or whether it's state level or local level, that's an area that we need to be aware of at all times. So, good. Other questions here? We really appreciate everybody hanging in there with us. Somebody asked me today how long the meeting would go, and I refused to give an amount of time. And we know that, I didn't mention this at the beginning, but all these meetings, we want you to feel comfortable moving, leaving if you need to at any point. And I know people can tune in and out. This is going to be available, right, Mrs. Gaston, on Swather Sports Network. So if you want to, go back through something that maybe you missed, or if somebody asks, make sure you let them know. We'll send out a link so that people can access that. We hope that the information is helpful. We, in my mind at least, you try to put things together in a way that's giving people the information that they need. I know that's been limited as we go. We'll do that again on the 27th. There'll be information that comes to you between now and then. But we want you to make sure you're asking us or sharing concerns with us. If you have questions or concerns, let us know what those things are. That's why we're here. These guys' job and their staff is going to be, you're going to have a busy few weeks, and then it's going to get busier as school actually begins. I'm available. Central office is a great resource for a lot of questions that you have. The ladies over there have been around for a long time in that office. They know how things work from an organizational standpoint. So we're here to answer your questions. We've got some things that we're starting to tighten up a little bit, but at the same time, we want to remain flexible and let you know that we're here to serve you, and appreciate all your time and attention. Did we have anything come in, Clint, as I rattle things off? Okay. All right. Well, if nobody else has any questions, thanks for coming. And again, please holler if you need anything at all. Thank you.